She had nowhere to sleep.
Nowhere to go. Pregnant, rejected, and hungry. But one night she heard an explosion on the village road and ran toward it instead of away. Inside that burning car was a billionaire whose life was about to depend on hers. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and watch this story to the end. You'll be inspired. The sun rose slowly over the small village of Olawu, painting the thatched roofs with a golden glow. Roosters crowed in the distance, and the smell of wet earth filled the morning air. In the center of the village stood a compound known by everyone, the home of Chief Ajayi, the man who spoke for the gods. Chief Ajayi was feared and respected. His shrine was a sacred place people came to when they were sick, troubled, or cursed. Inside the small mud house stood carved wooden figures, white cowries, red cloth, and calabashes filled with palm oil. It was said that the gods of Olawu listened only to Chief Ajayi. But his only son, David, didn't see power in those things. Even as a boy, David's heart leaned toward the church. On Sunday mornings, while his father prepared sacrifices, David would sneak off to sit at the back of the small church by the market square. He loved the sound of the choir, the peace in their singing, and the pastor's words about mercy and love. His father hated it. One evening, he caught David returning from church and shouted, "You are the son of a priest of the gods, not a child of their enemies." David stood still, trembling. "Father, I believe in God Almighty. I cannot bow to these idols." The old man's voice rose like thunder. "The gods of Olawu protected this land during the Civil War. No bullet entered this village because of them. You will learn their ways, or you will face their anger." David said nothing more that night. He sat under the mango tree behind their house, staring at the sky. He didn't hate his father, he just couldn't worship what he didn't believe in. Years passed. David grew into a tall young man, hard-working and quiet. He helped his father fetch firewood, pound herbs, and clean the shrine, but never prayed there. When villagers came with goats or fowls for sacrifice, he watched with no words, his heart heavy. Then one rainy season, Chief Ajayi fell sick. His strength faded quickly. The villagers brought herbalists and prophets, but nothing worked. One night, he called David to his bedside. His voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp. "David," he said slowly, "when I die, promise me you will continue the work. Promise me the shrine will not fall silent." David wanted to say no, but seeing the tears in his father's eyes, he nodded quietly. "I promise," he whispered. A few days later, Chief Ajayi died. The whole village mourned. Drums beat through the night. The shrine was decorated in red and white cloth. Elders came to perform the final rites. Everyone expected David to take his father's place, but after the burial, David sat alone under the same mango tree where he used to pray as a boy. His promise to his father burned in his chest. He knew he had to make a choice between his father's gods and the God he had always believed in. At dawn, he rose and walked to the shrine. The air was cold, the sky gray. Inside, the idols stood silently, faces painted with chalk. David looked around, breathing heavily. Then he whispered, "You did not save my father. You cannot save me." He picked up a clay pot of palm oil and smashed it to the ground. The oil spread like blood on the floor. One by one, he broke every calabash, threw down the carvings, and poured kerosene on the altar. When he struck the match, the fire rose fast, licking the walls and swallowing the old gods in smoke. The air filled with the smell of burning wood and oil. People came running from their huts, shouting his name. "David, what have you done?" But David didn't move. He watched the flames rise higher until everything his father had worshipped was gone. Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, the old women cried. The elders whispered that the gods would not stay silent. Some said David had cursed his bloodline forever. That night, as the rain began to fall and cool the ashes of the shrine, David sat in his small house reading his Bible by the weak light of a kerosene lamp. His heart was calm, but far away, thunder rolled like an unseen warning. After the death of his father, David began to rebuild his life. He kept to himself, farmed quietly, and avoided arguments with the villagers. Though people still whispered about the shrine he had burnt, he focused on his work and his peace. It was at the stream that he met Grace, a bright, beautiful young woman from the next village. Her laughter carried through the air like music. She was the daughter of a palm wine tapper, gentle in nature, but strong in spirit. David noticed her kindness before anything else. When he saw her helping an old woman fetch water, he felt something move in his heart. Soon, he found reasons to visit the stream more often. They talked, they laughed, and slowly, a quiet friendship turned into love. When David decided to make it official, he took palm wine and went with a few elders to meet Grace's father. The man, known as Pa Durajaye, was a respected Christian farmer. But before David's visit, Pa Durajaye's kinsmen had already gathered in his compound. They warned him strongly not to give his daughter's hand in marriage. "Don't do it," one of them said. "That young man is cursed. He burnt the shrine of the deity that protects our land. His name brings bad luck." Another man raised his hand and said, "If you marry your daughter to him, it will be a disaster for your family. The gods of this land are not forgiving. The day you give consent is the day trouble will enter your house." Durajaye listened quietly. When they finished, he said calmly, "You speak of fear, but I believe in God Almighty, not in idols. My daughter's future will not be decided by fear." They left angrily, shaking their heads. "We have warned you," they said. "You will regret this." When David arrived, he greeted the old man respectfully and stated his intention. Pa Durajaye looked at him with kind but searching eyes.
"My people have warned me against this union," he said.
"They say you are cursed because you burnt the shrine of your father's gods." David nodded. "Yes, I burnt it, but I did it with faith. I do not believe in gods made by men. I believe in the living God." The old man smiled faintly. "So do I," he said. "If love has brought you here, and if my daughter agrees, then I will not stand in your way. Let God decide the rest." And so, despite the warnings, David and Grace were married. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Drums echoed through the evening air. Friends danced, and Grace's father prayed quietly in his heart, asking God to protect them both. The early days of marriage were sweet. David and Grace worked together on the farm. They planted cassava and maize, fetched water together, and shared meals under the shade of the mango tree. Grace loved her husband deeply. But months later, everything began to change. The rains stopped coming. The earth cracked open. The wells dried up. The crops withered before harvest. At first, everyone thought it was a bad season. But when the drought continued, the people began to whisper again. They warned Pa Durajaye, they said. "Now the curse has spread to all of us. The land is angry." The hunger grew worse. Streams disappeared, and even animals died in the heat. Children cried at night from hunger. Then one afternoon, the people gathered and marched to David's house in anger. Men and women filled his compound, shouting, "You are the cause of our suffering," someone yelled. "Restore the deity you destroyed," another cried. "Bring back the shrine, or the gods will destroy us all." Grace stood behind her husband, terrified. David came out slowly, his face calm. "I will not rebuild what I burnt," he said firmly. "The rain belongs to heaven, not to idols." The crowd grew louder, throwing curses and dust into the air. The village chief tried to calm them, but the people's hunger had turned to rage. As evening fell, they left one by one, murmuring threats under their breath. That night, The wind howled around the small house. Grace sat beside David in silence. He looked tired but unbroken.
"If this is the price of my faith," he said softly,
"let God's will be done." He knelt by the bedside and whispered one short prayer. "Lord, you see my heart. Let your will be done." Grace watched him quietly, her heart torn between love and fear, not knowing that this night would mark the beginning of everything that was yet to come. The days after the village's riot were painfully quiet. No one came near David's compound anymore. The same people who once shared food and laughter with him now crossed to the other side of the road when they saw him coming. But inside their small mud house, a different kind of silence lived, one filled with both fear and a fragile hope. Weeks after the drought began, Grace discovered she was with child. When she told David, his tired eyes brightened for the first time in months. He placed his hands gently on her belly and whispered, "Maybe this is God's way of showing us mercy." Grace smiled faintly, though worry clouded her heart. "I just want this child to live," she said softly. David nodded. "He will live, and he will carry faith stronger than mine." But the joy of the news was short-lived. The drought only worsened. The stream behind the village dried up completely. The soil cracked like broken glass under the sun. Even the wind carried the smell of dust. Inside their small house, David and Grace lived like shadows of their former selves. Their farm had failed completely. The few yams left in storage had gone soft and sour. Every day, Grace found a way to stretch one meal into two, just so her husband could eat something. But David's strength was fading. The sickness came quietly, first a mild cough, then fever, then weakness that left him unable to stand for long. One moonless night, unable to sleep, David stepped outside. The village was silent. The ashes of his father's burnt shrine still lay behind the mango tree, dark and cold. The night breeze carried a faint whisper that made his skin crawl. He stood before the ashes, breathing heavily. Then he heard it. A voice. "David." He froze. The voice came again, slow and deep, like a sound carried by the wind. "David, my son." He turned. Standing by the ashes was the faint figure of his father, Chief Ajayi, his eyes glowing faintly like red embers. David's heart pounded. "Father," the ghost spoke calmly, "you have angered the gods of this land. You broke the bond that protected us. Look around you. The rain is gone. The people suffer. Even your wife bears pain. Rebuild the shrine before it is too late." David's body trembled, but his eyes held firm. "Father, I cannot," he said softly. "I serve the living God. I will not rebuild what he helped me destroy." The old man's face darkened. "You have chosen death, my son, but through your death the gods will rise again." Before David could reply, the figure vanished into smoke. The air grew still, and the night went silent. He stood there for a long time, shivering. Then he whispered into the empty air, "Even if I die, I will not bow." By morning, his cough worsened. His body burned with fever. Grace boiled herbs and prayed silently, refusing to leave his side. But he grew weaker each day. On the third evening, David asked her to help him outside. His voice was faint, almost a whisper. "Take me to the mango tree," he said. "I want to see the sky one more time." She helped him out, one arm around his shoulder. They stopped beside the ashes of the shrine. He looked at the ground where he had once set the fire and smiled weakly. "I did what I thought was right," he said. "If I die, let it be known I did not bow." Grace wiped her tears. "You will not die," she whispered. "You will live." But as she spoke, his body began to shake. He fell to his knees, coughing violently. "David!" she screamed, dropping beside him. His eyes rolled back. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but no words came. Grace ran inside to get water. Her hands shook as she filled the cup. When she rushed back out, calling his name, he was already still. She dropped the cup. Water splashed onto the dust. "David!" she cried again, holding him tightly. Her tears soaked his shirt. Her screams echoed across the empty fields. Then the sky began to change. The wind rose suddenly, bending the trees. Thunder rolled above the hills. Lightning flashed across the horizon. And for the first time in months, the heavens opened. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking the dry earth, filling the cracks, washing the dust from the roofs. The villagers ran out of their huts, shouting in joy. "It's raining! The curse is broken!" they cried. "The gods have accepted it!" But Grace didn't move. She stayed on the ground, her arms around her husband's body as the rain drenched them both. The same rain that brought life back to the land fell on the man who gave his life for faith. That night, Olawu slept under the sound of heavy rain, and in the corner of the village, a young widow held the man who had defied the gods, as the heavens wept for him. The rain poured through the night, heavy and loud, as if heaven itself had broken open. By morning, the dry land of Olawu looked new again. The dusty paths had turned to mud, and the villagers danced barefoot in the puddles. For the first time in months, the stream by the footpath was flowing again. But inside David's compound, the joy of the rain meant nothing. Grace sat beside his body, her wrapper soaked, her eyes swollen from crying. The smell of wet earth filled the air, but her world had gone silent. Neighbors gathered outside her gate, whispering. Some shook their heads, others pointed at the sky. "I told you," one man said. "The gods were waiting for him. Now that he's gone, they've accepted his death." "Look how the rain came," another added. "The land is free again." By noon, the village elders arrived with their staffs, led by Pa Sanya, the oldest man in Olawu. His face was firm, his eyes full of judgment. "Woman," he said, standing by the doorway, "the gods have spoken through the rain. Your husband's death has brought peace to this land, but his body cannot be buried here." Grace looked up slowly, her face pale and empty. "He is my husband," she said quietly. "He deserves a proper burial." Harsanya shook his head. "No. He defied the deity of this land. He burnt the shrine that protected us. His spirit is cursed. If we bury him here, misfortune will return. His body must be thrown into the evil forest." Grace's lips trembled. "You can't do that." He was a good man. He meant no harm, but her cries meant nothing. The elders signaled the young men who had followed them. They stepped forward, lifted David's body roughly, and carried him away. Grace ran after them, screaming, but they pushed her to the ground. She watched helplessly as the man she loved was taken down the red, muddy path that led to the forest, the place where cursed souls were left to rot. Her sobs echoed through the rain-washed air until her voice broke. When she returned to the compound, her clothes were covered in mud. The women who came to console her didn't enter the house. They stood outside, watching her with mixed pity and fear. "She must not stay here," one of them whispered. "Yes," another said, "the land rejects him, and her too." That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, the villagers gathered again. This time, they came with sticks and palm leaves, the same way they came when they rioted. Pa Sanya stood before them and spoke loudly so all could hear. "The curse must be completely removed from Olawu. The wife of the one who burnt the shrine cannot live among us. If she stays, the gods may turn against us again." Grace came out slowly, holding her belly. Her voice shook as she said, "Where will I go? I have no one else. I am carrying his child." But no one answered. Some looked away. Others shouted for her to leave before sunset. The women from the village fetched her few belongings, a cooking pot, a wrapper, a wooden bowl, and dropped them at her feet. Grace looked around, searching for one kind face, but all she saw were eyes filled with fear. As the crowd began to chant, she picked up her things and walked away. Her feet sank into the wet soil. Her clothes clung to her skin. She didn't look back. The rain had stopped, but drops still fell from the trees, hitting the ground like tears. The sky was dark, the air heavy. Every step she took felt like a goodbye. By the time she reached the edge of the village, night was falling. The path ahead led into the thick bush, a place where no one lived, where only birds and insects kept company. Grace stopped once, turned back toward the village, and whispered, "You may throw him away, but I will carry his name in my heart." Then she walked into the bush, alone. Under the sound of crickets and the whisper of trees, she built a small shelter with palm leaves and sticks. There, she sat by the firelight, staring at her belly. "God," she said softly, "if you see me, don't let this child die. Give me strength to live." The night was quiet. The stars looked down through thin clouds. Somewhere far away, a dog barked, and in that lonely corner of the world, a widow began her life again, carrying both a curse and a promise in her womb. The seasons changed slowly. Weeks turned into months, and the memory of David faded from the lips of the people of Olowu. Only one person still spoke his name, Grace. In her small hut near the edge of the bush, she lived quietly, surviving on little. She planted maize behind her hut and fetched water from a small stream nearby. Sometimes she traded fruits for salt or soap from passing travelers, but most days she lived on hope and silence. Her belly grew heavier each week. She often sat under the tree outside her hut, rubbing her stomach and whispering softly, "You will live, my child. You will not carry your father's curse. You will carry his courage." At night, when the wind moved through the trees, she sometimes thought she heard David's voice, calm and gentle, telling her not to give up. The rains ended, and the land turned green again. From afar, she watched villagers returning to their farms, laughing and rebuilding their lives. She stayed away, but her faith remained. Far away, in the bustling city of Lagos, another story was unfolding. William Okafor, a billionaire businessman in his early 40s, sat in his glass-walled office overlooking the busy streets. His face was calm and confident, but behind his success lived quiet sadness. He had built one of the largest construction companies in Nigeria. Tall buildings, major roads, estates, yet wealth could not fill the emptiness in his heart. 4 years ago, his wife had died while giving birth to their second child. Their first child, Michael, was just 3 years old at the time. The baby, Chloe, survived, a beautiful girl who was now 4. Since that day, William had never remarried. He poured all his love into his work and his 2 children. His home in Lekki was bright and filled with the laughter of Michael and Chloe, yet every sound reminded him of who was missing. The only person who truly understood him was Auntie Mercy, a gentle, 55-year-old nanny who had served the family since before the children were born. One quiet evening, as they sat at dinner, Mercy said softly, "Sir, you've carried sorrow for too long. You should let your heart breathe again." William smiled faintly. "I have my children, Mercy. They are enough for me." She looked at him kindly. "They are enough to keep you busy, but not enough to keep you whole." He said nothing. His gaze drifted to the framed photo on the wall, his late wife holding baby Michael, smiling at him. The memory was both sweet and sharp. Weeks later, William decided to travel to his hometown, Obele, a quiet, green village where he was building a large country home. The project was nearly done, and he wanted to inspect the work before Christmas. When he arrived, the workers welcomed him warmly. The house was almost complete, the roof installed, tiles laid, the walls painted fresh. The contractor promised, "Sir, everything will be ready before December 15th. William walked through the house, imagining his children running across the floor. For the first time in a long while, he felt a hint of peace. As evening approached, he thanked the workers, entered his black G-Wagon, and started his journey back to Lagos. The sky glowed golden, the air soft and quiet. He turned on the radio and played one of his late wife's favorite gospel songs. Her voice echoed in his memory, and for a moment he smiled. The narrow road stretched ahead, lined with trees and small farms. He slowed down near the bend, then picked up speed again. He didn't see the deep pothole ahead. The front tires hit hard. The steering wheel jerked violently. The car swerved off the road and crashed head-on into a big tree. The sound shattered the calm, metal twisting, glass breaking, the horn blaring endlessly. Smoke began to rise from the bonnet. William's head hit the steering wheel, and everything went dark. The smell of petrol filled the air. Flames flickered beneath the car. Not far away, Grace sat outside her hut, peeling maize by the firelight. The loud crash echoed through the night. She froze, listening. Then came the faint crackle of fire. She dropped everything and ran toward the sound, barefoot, her wrapper flying behind her. When she reached the road, her breath caught. A black SUV was crushed against a tree, smoke and flames rising from its front. She covered her mouth with her wrapper and shouted, "Is anyone there?" No answer. Through the cracked glass, she saw a man slumped over the steering wheel. The fire was spreading fast. Without hesitation, Grace grabbed her small farm knife, broke the side glass, and cut the seatbelt. The heat scorched her face, but she kept pulling. With all her strength, she dragged him out just moments before the car exploded behind them, fire bursting into the air. When the flames settled, she looked down at the man, his shirt torn, his face covered in dust and blood, his breathing faint. "God, please," she whispered, her hands trembling. "Don't let him die." She brushed dirt from his face, lifted his head gently onto her lap, and began dragging him toward her small hut, unaware that this single act of mercy would change both of their destinies forever. The night air smelled of smoke and wet soil as Grace dragged the unconscious man through the narrow bush path. The glow of the burning car still lit the road behind her, flickering like a dying sunset. Her bare feet sank into the soft ground, her breathing sharp and heavy, but she didn't stop. At last, she reached her small hut. The thatched roof dripped rainwater from the afternoon storm, and the faint light of her oil lamp trembled against the walls. She laid the man carefully on the mat, his body limp, his clothes torn. For a moment she just stared at him, this stranger she had pulled from death. He was tall, fair-skinned, dressed in what looked like city clothes. His wristwatch alone could buy the whole village market, yet here he was, helpless on her floor. "Stay with me," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Don't go." She fetched a bowl of water, dipped a cloth inside, and cleaned the blood from his face. Beneath the soot, she saw fine features. A man used to comfort, now lying in the hands of a woman the world had thrown away. When she touched his forehead, it burned with fever. She quickly gathered herbs from a calabash beside her bed, ground them with a stone, and mixed them in warm water. Then she raised his head carefully and forced a few sips through his lips. Hours passed. The crickets sang. The fire crackled softly. At dawn, when the first light entered the hut, William groaned faintly. His eyes fluttered open, confused, staring at the ceiling of woven bamboo. Where am I?" he muttered weakly. Grace knelt beside him, relief flooding her face. "You're safe," she said softly. "Your car crashed. I pulled you out before it exploded." He blinked, trying to sit up, but pain shot through his body. My car? "It's gone," she said quietly. "It burned." He looked around the small hut. the wooden stool, the clay pots, the bundle of dried maize hanging from the ceiling. "Where is this place?" "Away from the road," she said. "My home." William tried to speak but winced. Grace quickly held his hand. "Don't move. You hit your head hard." He stared at her. This young woman in a faded wrapper, hair tied back, eyes full of both strength and kindness. "You saved me?" She nodded. "God helped me. I only did what any human should." He smiled faintly. "Not everyone would have done what you did." For a moment, silence filled the room. The morning sun slipped through the cracks in the wall, falling across their faces. Grace stood and stirred the small pot by the fire. The smell of boiling herbs filled the air. "Drink this," she said, handing him a cup. "It will help your fever." He drank slowly, watching her move around the hut, calm, gentle, focused. Her belly showed slightly beneath her wrapper. She noticed his eyes glance there and said quietly, "I'm expecting a child." "I see," William replied softly. "Your husband must be proud." Her eyes dimmed for a moment. "He's gone." William lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." They said nothing else for a long while. The only sound was the whisper of wind through the palm leaves above. Days passed. William's wounds began to heal. Each morning, Grace wiped his face with cool water, changed his bandage, and fed him the little food she had. She slept lightly by the door, waking at every sound. One afternoon, as he gained strength, he asked, "What's your name?" "Grace," she said simply. He smiled. "Fitting. You brought grace to my life, literally." She laughed softly, the first time she had truly laughed in months. "And you? What's your name?" "William," he said. "William Okafor." She paused. The name meant nothing to her, but his tone carried weight. "You should rest, William Okafor," she said gently. "Your body still needs time." That night, as the moon rose and the air grew cool, William lay awake, listening to the sound of her breathing. This woman, alone in the wild, had risked her life to save him. He had never met anyone like her. Outside, the crickets sang again. Inside, a quiet bond began to grow, one born from fire, pain, and mercy. Neither of them knew that the world they came from, her world of exile and his world of wealth, was already moving toward a collision that would change both of their lives forever. The morning was calm. The soft light of dawn filtered through the palm trees outside Grace's hut. William Okafor sat on the wooden stool near the doorway, his bandaged arm resting on his knee. He could finally stand and walk on his own. "Grace," he said quietly, watching her stir the small pot of herbs over the fire. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has. I can never thank you enough." She smiled faintly, without looking up. "Don't thank me. Thank God for giving you another chance." William nodded slowly. "That's exactly why I want to give you one too." She turned to him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes. "Come with me to Lagos. You saved my life. You don't belong in this place of pain anymore." Grace froze, her hand gripping the spoon. "Lagos?" she repeated softly. "I've never been to the city. I wouldn't know how to live there." William stood slowly, steadying himself. "You'll learn. You've survived worse. Please, don't say no. Let me help you." Grace looked around her little hut. The mat on the floor, the cracked clay pots, the old firewood stacked in the corner. This was all she had known since her exile. Her eyes softened. "Let me pack my things." She folded her clothes neatly into a small cloth bundle, tied it with a rope, and picked up her Bible, the only thing she never let go of. William smiled as he watched her. "Is that everything?" She nodded. "That's all I own." They stepped out together, the morning sun warm on their faces. Birds sang in the distance as they walked along the narrow bush path. William moved slowly, still weak, leaning on a stick Grace had carved for him days earlier. She walked beside him, carrying her bundle and a small gourd of water. After about half an hour, they reached the main road, a long, dusty stretch that led toward Lagos. The road was quiet, except for the sound of crickets and faraway motor noise. William looked at her and said softly, "Let's wait. Someone will come." Minutes later, an old commercial bus rumbled down the road, its paint faded, its horn blaring. Grace waved her hand shyly, and the driver stopped with a screech. "Lagos!" he shouted from the window. William smiled. "Perfect." They climbed in, Grace first, then William. The passengers inside looked at them curiously. A tall man in city clothes and a young woman with a simple wrapper and kind eyes. As the bus drove off, Grace held her small bag tightly. The road stretched long before them, farms, trees, small villages flashing past the window. William watched her silently. She looked out, eyes wide with wonder, like someone seeing the world for the first time. Hours passed. When they finally entered Lagos, the noise and light hit her all at once. Tall buildings, cars honking, crowds moving in every direction. She leaned closer to the window, whispering, "So, this is the city." William smiled. "Welcome to Lagos, Grace." The bus stopped near a fuel station on the island. A black car from William's company was already waiting there, the driver sent earlier by his assistant. When they got in, Grace sat quietly, her heart beating fast as the city lights shimmered past. Soon they arrived at William's mansion. Tall white gates opening to a wide driveway, flowers lining the entrance, the sound of birds replaced by silence and luxury. Grace stepped out slowly, her slippers touching the smooth tiles. The air smelled of perfume and polish. It felt like another world. Inside, Auntie Mercy ran out, shouting in shock, "Sir, you're alive! Oh, thank God!" She held her chest, almost crying. William smiled tiredly. "I'm fine, Mercy. This woman saved me." Mercy turned to Grace, eyes wide with gratitude. "God bless you, my dear. You've done what even angels couldn't." Then came two small voices. "Daddy!" Michael and Chloe ran into his arms, laughing, crying, talking all at once. William held them tight, tears welling in his eyes. He looked at Grace. "Children, this is Grace, the woman who helped Daddy when he was hurt." Chloe looked up shyly. "Thank you, Ma." Michael grinned. "You're very brave." Grace smiled, her heart swelling quietly. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, William stood by his window, looking out at the city lights. Downstairs, Grace sat alone in the guest room, still amazed by everything. The walls, the light, the comfort. Both of them were thinking the same thing. How strange it was that fire and pain had brought them to this peaceful night. And in that great house, the man who had lost hope and the woman once called cursed began a new chapter. Two worlds, finally crossing for a reason bigger than both of them. The days rolled by quietly in the Okafor mansion. Grace had now become more than a guest. She was the heart of the home. Every morning, she helped Auntie Mercy prepare breakfast.